Namaste. Sri Krishna has talked about wisdom. The all-pervading is not concerned about people's sins or virtues. Wisdom, although the natural state of every man, is eclipsed by cosmic delusion. Mankind thus becomes bewildered as to the difference between right and wrong. So Krishna is saying, and this is the sign of divine wisdom, he doesn't concern himself with the sins and the virtues of people. Why not? You'd think that would be a major concern of his. Well, he sees all of this is God's dream. God sees man as the individual soul whom he has thrown into outward manifestation. It's really his own consciousness that's creating. I've often thought the motive for creating this universe, Sri Yukteswar said, leave a few questions to be answered in the divine. But I couldn't leave it there myself. I had to have some sort of answer. Why did God create this whole thing? And the Shastras do give us one answer. They say that God wanted to enjoy himself through many. And the question is it really joy when you see somebody suffering in a dungeon, suffering from a painful disease, all the sufferings that people go through in this world? Krishna says, get away from my ocean of suffering and misery. Can God enjoy that? Is he a sadist? Well, of course he's not. And so I think that the nature, this is why God would create this world. I can give it a more cosmic twist also, but I think it is the nature of bliss itself to want to expand itself. I know that the more bliss I feel inside in myself, the more I want to share it with other people. The more bliss I feel, the more I feel it not possible not to love everybody, because they're all seeking that same bliss, and all of them are expressing it in a different, each one in a different way, and all of them are moving in their different ways toward that ultimate apotheosis of bliss. And so this is I think that's the best possible explanation, except possibly it wouldn't work for people who don't understand bliss. Nonetheless, it satisfies me. But here's the other side of that story, that there isn't bliss in these poor suffering people while they're suffering. So there's also another possibility that God enjoys himself through many, okay, but as you enjoy a good novel. So let us say you have a novel in which a young man is born into a wealthy home, and because of his father's influence, he gets to meet gets to get a good job, he gets to be friends with the boss, he gets to meet the boss's daughter, they fall in love, they get married, and when the boss dies, he inherits his home, and everything is perfect, everything is beautiful, he never has any trouble. I suspect that everybody would put that novel down about 1/3 of the way through. You want tension, you want difficulty, you want to have something to overcome. And so if you had the same boy born into a poor home as we would say in America, on the wrong side of the tracks, and with great study, with great effort, they don't have the money for him to study, so he has to read at night by candlelight, but with great effort he manages to get a good education, and with that good education he gets a good job, and with diligence and intelligence he gradually rises, and in the firm he rises to a high position, and he meets the boss's daughter and they fall in love, and all the same things happen, same outcome. But you would close the book very pleased with it. You would say, what a good story. So it is that we've come into this world with lots of difficulties. We've been born, you might say, on the wrong side of the tracks. I mean, to begin as a worm, you'd go on the wrong side of the tracks, isn't it? And you begin much lower even than that. In fact, you begin as a stone. You begin as a solid, a little atom. My guru said, every atom is dowered with individuality. No matter how tiny the point, truth is God's consciousness, is center everywhere, circumference nowhere. And everything is conscious. It could not have come into existence except in consciousness. It is that we now can tell these things more clearly because people can understand them. Matter is really energy. Then where did energy come from? From ideas, vibrating. Matter is only a vibration. Energy is only a vibration. Ideas are only a vibration. And finally, even many scientists today say that everything really looks like it's suspiciously like it comes from consciousness. Well, this is what the teachings of India have been saying for thousands of years. Everything was consciousness. Nothing could exist except as a manifestation of consciousness. God projected his consciousness into thoughts, and he projected those thoughts into vibrations of energy. He projected that energy into vibrations of apparent matter, but there is nothing solid really. And it is possible for consciousness to go through a wall, for consciousness to go through a rock. The rock wouldn't impede it at all. There's no reality in it. So it is that we must understand that our consciousness is a part of God's consciousness. But we begin our evolution. Why? Darwin had the how of some of it. He missed a lot, but at least he had some idea. But the thing is, why? Why does life evolve? When survival of the fittest, what could be more fit than a clam? There's a particular clam that just it lashes onto a rock, and then on that rock it just moves like this. Constantly moving, wearing a hole patiently in that rock. It takes 15 years for that clam to finally, that worm or whatever it is, to finally work its way into the rock so it can nestle inside it like that being its new home. And from there it can reach out and get things. Well, 15 years. The lower forms of life are very low, but they're still all God. Yogananda said he could remember back to when he was a diamond. Well, maybe that's why he became a very special kind of soul, I don't know. But gradually what makes life evolve is not competition. There is not much ego in a worm. There is, however, life and consciousness. You prick a worm, and it's self-conscious, isn't it? Enough to try to wriggle away. There's one thing science will never be able to produce. They say they can produce consciousness. No. They can produce a machine which can become a robot, which can help you to, perhaps a machine could get you to eat and swallow food. It could not get you to enjoy the taste of that food. It could not say, I am enjoying that food. Two things science can never produce, because it's in the bedrock of reality. It can't produce feeling, it can't produce self-consciousness. If it ever produces a form that can become that way, it will be like possession, where another entity can come into a blank mind and use that body, though it's not its own body. But it will not be able to produce that person that comes into the body. It has to come from God. So the real reason for evolution itself is this desire constantly for, believe it or not, Satchidananda. Everything is seeking its own source, its own reality. And everything, therefore, is seeking consciousness and self-consciousness. More and more and more of that. The worm has it already, but it can't express it clearly. And as it evolves further, finally it develops a spine. And in the vertebrates, you see much more consciousness, much more ability to react to things and to gain for self and do those things which will not do those things which would harm the self. And so with this vertebra, you come to the battle of the war of Kurukshetra, the battle between the habits which pull you downward and the divine power and devotion which pulls you upward. But all evolution may be explained by this simple desire to become more conscious, and then more self-conscious, and then more conscious of yourself as bliss, and finally to realize that this little body is not going to give you what you want, because there's something about the ego that is very limiting. And in fact, the ego is really an element of the astral body. And I cannot think of a greater hell than being stuck in this ego for eternity. I remember one Christian theologian I read who would say that for the Christian to get rid of the ego it would be absurd, it would be unthinkable. Well, you'd better learn to think that way, because you'll never find happiness. Even in the most exalted heaven, as long as there's that limitation, there will still be this thought, I want to get rid of it. There is this deep impulse in everything and everybody to get rid of the self and to realize it is one with all that is. So sadhana, the spiritual path, and evolution itself all conspire in the same direction, but God can't really be said to enjoy this process. What he must enjoy is the outcome of this process. And yet, he must also enjoy the fact that he sees in everything this constant push toward bliss, this constant push toward absolute bliss and complete freedom in the infinity of bliss. So that is the true explanation of evolution, the why of it. The lower animals, you'll notice interesting, they all seem to have tails. That's because the energy is still going downward. Once you enter the human body, let us say well, often it will be domestic animals, because animals that live with human beings are influenced by human beings to raise their consciousness to ever higher levels. And it's very good for human beings in compassion to help animals to grow. And every human being also, we're climbing this ladder, everyone should reach up to those states of consciousness. This is the fault of democracy, which is, I'm as good as anybody else. Well, yes, in God you are, but in reality, can you say that you're as good at running, as good at mathematics, as good at this and that and the other thing as everybody else? No, you can't. There's always a good, better, and best in this world. There's always a bad, worse, and worst in this world. And there will always be people above you and below you in every walk of life. So what you should do is, if you want to develop a particular skill, mix with the people who have that skill. Draw to yourself their magnetism. Ultimately, it becomes a matter of magnetism. When you put a thought, let us say a virtuous thought, you want to be kind, you want to be self-controlled, you want to be whatever it might be. What you need to do is develop that magnetism that will make you think. There was a man who Yogananda hired to do a painting of Lahiri Mahashai, my Param Guru. Is that right? No. Sri Krishna is my Param Guru, Lahiri Mahashai, my Param Guru. Okay. And this painter did it, and my guru looked at it and he saw that it was well done as a painting, but it didn't capture the spirit of that great master, because the artist didn't understand that. Anyway, he asked the artist, how long did it take you to master your art? He said, it took me 20 years. Yogananda shocked him by saying, you mean it took you 20 years to convince yourself you could paint? The man thought he was only being insulting. And he said, I'd like to see you learn as well in twice that length of time. And my guru said, give me a week. So the man just stormed out of the room and would have nothing more to say. But after a week, Yogananda just tried to tune in to that kind of magnetism that it takes to paint well. To do a thing well, you don't need to learn all the techniques and the knowledge around it. The main thing you need is the magnetism. I have found again and again that if I want to do a thing well, I need to get in tune with it. And when I can put out that magnetism, then it comes to me. So I remember Anandamoyi Ma, I was talking with her one time, and she said, well, I don't speak English, but if I put my mind to it, I could. Well, that's what she meant. She had put out that magnetism. on that ray of wavelength, you might say, and she would attract that knowledge. But she didn't do it because that wasn't worthwhile to her. So if you want to grow in knowledge, mix with the people who are good at that and develop their magnetism, and you will find with that magnetism you can succeed much more than you can by going to college and learning a lot of facts. And the other side of that is that as you mix with them, you draw their consciousness into yourself to rise to their level. So animals are helped by mixing with people. Shudra types of people are helped by being servants in the homes of people who are more aware. Vaishyas, for example, they could relate to each other more easily than if they were servants in the home of a Brahmin. But the caste system is really only showing different levels of natural human evolution. And if you will mix with saints, mix with spiritual enlightened people, it is said in the Shastras, one moment in the presence of a saint can be your raft over the ocean of delusion. Drawing that magnetism will help you to develop that kind of magnetic devotion that will draw into your orbit God Himself. So always understand that you must go upward in your evolution. That tail on a dog indicates that it is downward. You have to do everything to bring the energy up the spine, and there are different yoga techniques to help you to do that. But always try to direct your energy up to here. Don't let your energy fall. Most people live in the lower three chakras. Learn to develop the power to live more centered in the heart up to the head. Therefore, again, that technique in the Srimad Bhagavatam of thinking of the heart as a lotus and directing its rays of energy up to the brain. Joy to you.